Hello, my art historians. I am going to be doing an art piece in lesson 10. So, this piece we have is Miguel Cabrera's portrait of Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz. This was made in 1750. It is oil on canvas. It resides in Mexico. And you're probably wondering, why do we need to know this piece? Well, a little bit about, first of all, her. Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz was a nun. She actually was a child prodigy. She was born in 1648. She died in 1695. She was a Creole woman, so basically background of kind of a bunch of different things. And she became a nun in 1669. She chose to not be a traditional mother during that time, and she knew that in order to pursue her intellectual needs, she would need to become a nun. That was the only way that she could learn and read and become scholarly. So she was a nun during this time. And Miguel Cabrera, it's important to point out, he made this painting posthumously. So he did this painting 55 years after she had passed away. He made it in 1750. Why did he do this? Because there really weren't any portraits of her. And there were a lot of admirers of her. A lot of people, especially females, saw her as a person that was trying to create change um, for females. So basically, she was what we would call one of the first type of like feminists um, in a culture that was survived in Mexican convents, where being a privileged nun, you could live in comfort, you would have servants and a household, and you could also, she could feed her brain, so to speak. Um, so she was not only just like loved knowledge and things like that. She also, we consider her a literary figure. She wrote books. She did poetry. She wrote poetry. She did theatrical pieces. She corresponded with scientists, theologians, and other intellectual, like literary people abroad, not just in Mexico. Um, and she would be in these theological type debates. So she was super duper smart. Um, she was from the Jeromite order, so a nun for the Jeromite order, basically named after Saint Jerome. It was in 17th century, so that would be obviously the 1600s. Um, she she was as you could, okay, so she's sitting here, she's seated at a table, she is facing us, and so Miguel Cabrera takes a different take on basically doing a portrait or a painting of a nun, because she's facing us, and I get a sense of, it reminds me of like that female gaze, like she's looking at us, the viewer, directly. And she's very comfortable seated at her desk with her library behind her, which is filled with all kinds of books. As we said, I mean, there are books behind her on theology, mythology, history, philosophy, natural science. All those things are behind her. So it's kind of like showing her in her element, so to speak. So she's seated at the desk. She has in her left hand a rosary, and her right hand is on the desk in an open book, about to turn a page. There is quills, writing quills on the table. And we also see this red like curtain in the background a little bit. This was something that Miguel Cabrera wanted to create when he did this posthumous type of portrait. He wanted it to give a sense of the way that you would see other intellectual people in their library, at their desk, within their studies, that kind of thing. And he was trying to give us a sense of that with Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz. Now, she is wearing something rather important that we should know. This is called it's around her neck. Well, it's in the front of her neck, and it looks like a big piece of wood placed there. It looks very odd, but it actually is a part of the painting, and it's called an escudo de moña. And this is a nun, basically, it means the nun's badge. And on it is the Annunciation. So, what's happening, the little painting on there is when Angel Gabriel goes and tells Mary that she's going to have baby Jesus. So that's what's happening on that Escudo de Moña. So there's a sense of juxtaposition here, in the sense that she's got this religious versus intellectual life. And she did ended up writing one of her most famous works called The Answer in 1691. This work actually defended her right as a woman to write and to be a scholar. Well, she was basically trying to make a stand, or stand up for women and their rights and things like this. Like, she had to give up being a wife and have a family and become a nun in order to pursue this, and so she was standing up for others. The church did end up, after she wrote that famous work, The Answer, they did end up relinquishing her literary pursuits, and they even took her library. When she sold her library and her musical and scientific instruments, she wrote a document that renounced her learning, which ended in "I, Sor Juana Inez de la Cruz, the worst in the world," and she signed it in her own blood. So after giving up her intellectual pursuits, she actually cared for a lot of really sick people. It was during an epidemic, and unfortunately, she fell sick and she did pass away. So she passed away in 1695. So that's why this piece is really important, of who she was, and then also how Miguel Cabrera was putting this portrait of her together posthumously and with so much symbolism, and how important she was in art history and art of the New Spain and Spanish colonies in America. And that is image or art piece number 9 for art history.